Jaya Rana Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Rana Madhava Kunja Vihari Kunja The verse I chose is chapter 9, text number 1. The chapter is entitled The Most Confidential Knowledge. The verse is on the board, so we'll say the Sanskrit. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Idam tu te guyatamam Vakshami Anasuyave Jnanam Vijnanam Sahitam Yatva Mokshase Shubhat Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Idam tu te guyatamam Vakshami Anasuyave Jnanam Vijnana Sahitam Yatva Mokshase Shubhat. Next.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Idam tu te guyatamam Pravachami Anasuyave Jnanam Vijnanam Sahitam Yadgantva Mokshase Subhat.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Idam tu te guyatamam Vakshami Anasave Jnanam Vijnana Sahitam
Bhagavan-uvacha
Shri Bhagavan-uvacha
Idam te guhyatamam
Idante guhyatamam
Prakshami anasuyave
Prabhashami anasuyave
Gnana Vijnana Sahitam
Jnana Jnana Sahitam
Yajnatvam Nakshashuvaya
Shri Bhagavan-uvacha
Shri Bhagavan-uvacha
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said,
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said,
Idam,
this,
to,
but,
te,
unto
you, Guhyatamam, the most confidential, Pravakshami, I am speaking, Anasuyave, to the non-envious, Jnanam, knowledge, Vijnana, realize knowledge, Sahitam, with, Yat, which, Yatva, knowing, Mokshase, you will be released, Ashubhat, from this miserable material existence. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, My dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence. I say, and you please repeat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, My dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence. Report by Srila Prabhupada. As a devotee hears more and more about the Supreme Lord, he becomes enlightened. This hearing process is recommended in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The messages of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are full of potencies, and these potencies can be realized if topics regarding the Supreme Godhead are discussed amongst devotees. I'll repeat that. The messages of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are full of potencies, and these potencies can be realized if topics regarding the Supreme Godhead are discussed amongst devotees, which we're doing right now. This cannot be achieved by the association of mental speculators or academic scholars, for it is realized knowledge. The devotees are constantly engaged in the Supreme Lord's service. The Lord understands the mentality and sincerity of a particular living entity who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and gives him the intelligence to understand the science of Krishna in the association of devotees. Discussion of Krishna is very potent, and if a fortunate person has such association and tries to assimilate the knowledge, then he will surely make advancement towards spiritual realization. Lord Krishna, in order to encourage Arjuna to higher and higher elevation in his potent service, describes in this 9th chapter matters more confidential than he had already disclosed. The very beginning of Bhagavad Gita, the first chapter, is more or less an introduction to the rest of the book. And in the 2nd and 3rd chapters, the spiritual knowledge described is called confidential. Topics discussed in the 7th and 8th chapters are specifically related to devotional service, and because they bring enlightenment in Krishna consciousness, they are called more confidential. But the matters which are described in the 9th chapter deal with unalloyed, pure devotion. Therefore, this is called the most confidential. One is situated in the most confidential knowledge of Krishna, is naturally transcendental. He therefore has no material pangs, although he is in the material world. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it is said that although one who has a sincere desire to render loving service to the Supreme Lord is situated in the conditional state of material existence, he is to be considered liberated. Similarly, we shall find in the Bhagavad Gita 10th chapter that anyone who is engaged in that way is a liberated person. Now this first verse has specific significance. The words idam jnana, this knowledge, refer to pure devotional service which consists of 9 different activities: hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, worshiping, praying, obeying, maintaining friendship, and surrendering everything. By the practice of these 9 elements of devotional service, one is elevated to spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness. When one's heart is thus clear of material contamination, one can understand this science of Krishna. Simply to understand that a living entity is not material is not sufficient. That may be the beginning of spiritual realization, but one should recognize the difference between activities of the body and the spiritual activities of one who understands that he is not the body. In the 7th chapter, we have already discussed the opulent potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his different energies, the inferior and superior natures, and all this material manifestation. Now in chapter 9, the glories of the Lord will be delineated. The Sanskrit word anasuyave in this verse is also very significant. Generally, the commentators, even if they are highly scholarly, are all envious of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even the most erudite scholars write on Bhagavad Gita very inaccurately because they are envious of Krishna. Their commentaries are useless. The commentaries given by the devotees of the Lord are bona fide. No one can explain Bhagavad Gita or give perfect knowledge of Krishna if he is envious. One who criticizes the character of Krishna without knowing him is a fool. So much commentary should be very carefully avoided. Such commentaries should be very carefully avoided. Thank you. For one who understands that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the pure and transcendental personality, these chapters will be very beneficial. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence." Oh, never envious of Krishna. What to speak of? Does that stop there? Or is it also of his part and parcels? So if we find ourselves, just like I forgot my glasses at home, so I'm borrowing these beautiful designer glasses. So if I were become envious of Yogi's glasses, is that something good or bad? Bad, yes. And even to carry it further, say I were to steal Yogi's glasses. That's even worse, isn't it? So these things, enviousness, can lead so many other detrimental things to our Krishna consciousness. So we must be very careful about being envious in any way, form, or fashion towards other living entities, or to speak of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's so many dualities in the material world. There's a good side and bad side, I guess you could say, just about everything. So one of my bad things that I have to do almost on a daily basis is drive extensively. So the good thing about that, though, is I get to listen to Srila Prabhupada. So I was listening to some of his lectures recently where he was giving definitions of spiritual life. And he said, in one lecture, he said, spiritual life means not to be envious. That was his definition of spiritual life, not to be envious. In another lecture, he said, spiritual life means free from material desires. So he gave those two definitions of spiritual life. And he was stressing, and I can't remember which lecture he was stressing this. He was stressing the need that we have to give up designation. We have to become free from these bodily concepts of life, which is one of the main causes of so much distress in the world. Not accepting everyone as being part and parcel of the Supreme. You know, instead of seeing every living entity as part and parcel of the Supreme, we want to give a designation to it. Oh, he's Russian, he's Italian, he's English, he's this, he's that. Why do we do that? At some point in the history of the material world, these designations arise. They're not there in the spiritual world. Everyone there sees everyone in relation to the Supreme. They relate to each other in relation to the Supreme. So, this is something we should meditate on. And so, on Christmas Day also is the Yogi Prabhu said, the disappearance of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. And Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj would say that there is no scarcity of anything within this material world. The only scarcity is lack of Krishna consciousness. So this is something that we are so fortunate to have this knowledge and to be able to associate like this and share this knowledge with each other and share each other's realizations. And this is what we're meant to do, actually. There's the old saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So we have to remember in sharing this knowledge with people, we should be in a mood of compassion. It's described that a devotee's eyes should be anointed with the salve of love. You could actually see that in Srila Prabhupada's eyes. You could actually observe it. And the way he dealt with everyone was in such a compassionate, loving way. I often tell the story of when he was here. Actually, this was when he was in New Orleans. There was one gentleman who was sitting behind me, and he would phrase his questions in such a way. He would say, "Can you speak to us of this? Can you speak to us of that?" So one of his questions was, can you speak to us of love? And Prabhupada immediately say Krishna is love. And then he elaborated on it. So then this gentleman, without me knowing, he was sitting behind me, he got up to leave at a point in time in the darshan. And Prabhupada's voice changed. He said, "Where are you going?" And it really shocked everyone in the room because his voice became so powerful and so demanding. "Where are you going?" That the man just kind of stopped. And then he explained, he said, "I had a previous engagement that I had committed to, and so I have to leave to meet that commitment." So then from that strong, powerful, ominous voice that came out of Srila Prabhupada, he then turned to Nityananda and he said, in the most loving voice, the most compassionate voice, he just said 4 words, but it wasn't necessarily the words, but it was what you heard in those words. You could hear his love, you could hear his concern, you could hear his compassion, you could hear him wanting to give Krishna to this living entity. And he simply said, "Give him some prashad." But I can't say it how Prabhupada said it, because I'm not filled with love like he is. So from that, I actually learned and understood that should be it was Srila Prabhupada's goal to give everyone love of Krishna. That should be our goal, to share and give everyone love of Krishna. So these chapters, or the philosophy can get so intriguing, and there's so much to the philosophy. I believe Srila Prabhupada once said you could discuss one verse for 3 months or whatever. But so there's so much to discuss and so many realizations we could share on each one of these verses. But it's just like we are in this Krishna consciousness movement, which has grown in so many ways since the departure of Srila Prabhupada, and it is continuing, hopefully, to grow more and more in the future. And we actually have witnessed how the world has changed so much. Some may argue in negative ways, but also in very positive ways. It's very common now for others to be aware that there are people now who don't want to eat meat. And vegetarianism, veganism is accepted everywhere you go. So much so that from the capitalistic perspective, most restaurants offer vegetarian food of some sort because they don't want to lose out on that sale. So they give those options because they realize I heard a statistic, and I can't remember it, but it was how many millions of vegetarians there are in the world now. Of course, predominantly in India, but it has spread all over the world, vegetarianism, due in part, of course, to our movement. And this is just one aspect of souls becoming more enlightened, or more Krishna conscious, to stop killing and eating other living entities unnecessarily, just for the satisfaction of the palate. And people are becoming more aware, gradually, little by little, in different aspects. They're becoming, I was talking to some younger people a while back, and I was asking them, what do you think is the difference now between the different, generations? And the answer they gave me, they felt that the younger people are more in touch with their feelings, which also shows an advancement of one's consciousness, to be aware. You know, some generations went through almost a mechanical, this is how you do it. And, you know, I don't feel like doing that. I don't care. This is what you got to do. You do this. Almost a mother just said parents. Military type of mentality. You know, you get your orders and this is what you do. You got your orders, that's it. You don't discuss your feelings. I don't feel like doing that today. You want to go to jail? In the brig or whatever? What do they call it? So, the world has evolved and so many things have gotten better. And hopefully will continue to get better. But we should do our best to contribute to the betterment by being enthusiastic to spread this knowledge that Srila Prabhupada has given us. And do it in a way that we are caring and compassionate. In fact, Krishna warns us, if you spread this to someone who doesn't want to hear it, that's an offense to my holy name. So, if someone's not so interested, then leave them alone. That maybe in the future they will be more interested. So there's as this chapter progresses, there's another verse I wanted to just read quickly, because Krishna's saying, "O son of Pritha," this is the 13th text of this chapter, "those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible." So, Krishna is saying, he's calling you, everyone here, great souls. Because we know Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When Srila Prabhu was here at New Talavana, in the class he gave, he said, and I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember exactly, but he said, you simply follow this process, chanting Hare Krishna, attending one Lord morning program, worshipping Tulsi. He was praising, he actually praised Mother Govindadasi in his lecture for the first devotee to cultivate Tulsi Devi. Because we had big, beautiful Tulsi plants at that time when Prabhupada came. And he said, simply doing these things, he says, I promise you, you'll go back to Godhead in this lifetime. He said, no, he says, I don't promise, Krishna promises. So we sometimes take these things that Srila Prabhupada has given us for granted. It's our ticket back home. And we have to appreciate these gifts he's given us on a daily basis. Taking shelter of his program, of his books, and of the Association of Vaishnavas. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a verse that says, talking of Krishna, worshipping Krishna, and always chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. On these principles only does the Krishna consciousness movement go on. So that's what we do on a daily basis. We talk about Krishna, we worship Krishna, we chant Krishna's holy name. So I just, let me read this one I read this verse, and oftentimes I like, when Prabhupada uses the Bhagavad Gita verse in another one of his books, and he uses this verse also in the Nectar of Instruction. And it's in the second text, and I'll read the text and a little bit of what he says. Because this is about our devotional service. This is more instruction that Srila Prabhupada is giving us about devotional service. One's devotional service is spoiled when it becomes too entangled in the following 6 activities: eating more than necessary, or collecting more funds than required, over-endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to obtain, talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters, practicing the scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement, or rejecting the rules and regulations of the scriptures and working independently or whimsically, associating with worldly-minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness, and 6, being greedy for mundane achievements. Prabhupada's first sentence of this purport is, human life is meant for plain living and high thinking. Since all conditioned living beings are under the control of the Lord's third energy, this material world is designed so that one is obliged to work. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has 3 primary energies or potencies. The first is called Antaranga Shakti, or the internal potency. The second is called Tatashta Shakti, or the marginal potency. The third is called Bahiranga Shakti, or the external potency. The living entities constitute the marginal potency, and they are situated between the internal and external potencies. Being subordinate as eternal servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Jivatmas, or atomic living entities, must remain under the control of either the internal or external potency. When they are under the control of the internal potency, they display their natural constitutional activity, namely, constant engagement in the devotional service of the Lord. This is stated in Bhagavad Gita, which is the verse I just read to you, 9:13. Mahatmanas tu mam partha daimim prakritim ashrita vajatyananya manaso yata bhutadamam avyayam. O son of Prita, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. So, all of you are great souls because you are under the protection of Krishna's divine nature. So please don't leave this divine nature of Krishna. Srila Prabhupada also said that no ceremony or function is complete without the distribution of prasadam. So now we have 5 minutes, and then we'll be distributing prasadam, which is something that for probably the past 30 or 40 years, Maharani has diligently served and doing every Sunday for so many years, which we thank her for. And it's because she just wants to serve her husband so beautifully.
Not really. I had a comment.
Yes, go ahead, Mark.
I don't know how you. We hear Prabhupada's class here every Sunday, and Mother Harigwani was here. I happen to be here today too. My brain is not here. My brain is not anywhere. If I can grab one thing, guess one thing, it'll be good. He was saying, if someone assists a devotee who's serving Krishna, they get the same benefit as the person serving Krishna. Can you elaborate on that, what he really is talking about there?
I read that, or are you saying?
You said something similar too,
Oh,
and he said the same thing.
who's he?
Prabhupada.
Oh,
lecture.
Prabhupada. Yeah, well, I forget the, gosh, what's that called? Oh, someone help me. There's a, Prabhupada describes this. Someone who gets benefit not even knowing. I got this decree. Yes. Yes, thank you. Yes. And that's true. We see things oftentimes from material vision. But how does Krishna see things? So, in other words, Krishna sees us all as his part and parcels. And if someone helps someone here who is serving sincerely, who's trying to serve sincerely. Say you break down on the road and someone just stops and helps you change your tire, you get a flat tire. That person gets benefit. Why? He's helping Krishna's devotee. Don't take for granted. Oftentimes devotees think themselves so lowly and humble than straw in the street, and that's the mentality of the devotee. So to be humble like that. But how does Krishna see his devotee? Someone who's actually sincerely trying to serve him. And then how does Krishna see someone who actually tries to help that sincere devotee? So that devotee, he gets unknowingly, he's thinking, oh, I'm just doing a good deed, or I'm just trying to help a fellow human being. He may be an atheist. But in his mind, he may be an atheist. That may be his philosophical choice. But the fact that he's doing something that is beneficial to Krishna's devotee, Krishna doesn't forget that. I'm sorry, Mother, does that help at all?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes?
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's kind of random, but I'm wondering,
It's okay.
like you mentioned about stealing, is stealing mode of passion or ignorance or both?
I would guess it could be both. Just off the hip guess. It could be, seems like it could be both. There is sometimes stealing out of, for instance, years ago, there was a horrible storm that came through here, Katrina.
Mm-hmm.
I have a cousin who at the time was the main policeman in charge of Jefferson Parish. He was, so it was devastation all over. I mean, there was flooding, no electricity, so on. So the police had to try to monitor pilfering. So one day, they were at this one little convenience store, and there was a lady in there stealing some formula. Well, you could say she was stealing because there was actually no one to pay.
Mm.
But she was getting some formula for her child.
Yeah.
And so he told her, just take what you need and just leave. So you have to get out of here because we can't allow people. They were going around to make sure, protecting the businesses.
Yeah.
So her intention really wasn't to steal. Her intention was to care for her child.
Exactly.
So the point I'm trying to make is that one's intention, I believe, would become involved to a degree on whether it's just simply passion or ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments, questions, realizations? Just, we always mention this, but I feel it's always worth repeating. We always have to thank Krishna and Prabhupada every day for these wonderful gifts he's given us and realize our good fortune. If we take these things for granted, we're teetering on a very precarious level because Krishna can take them away. We can't take for granted the association of Vaishnavas. We can't take for granted the holy name. We can't take for granted Srila Prabhupada's books. These things have to be appreciated and diligently cared for. It's like, how do you value your Krishna consciousness? It's just like in the material world, they try to place value on things. So, they try to put a value on things based on what it's made of, sometimes, or where it is. For instance, they may say, well, this house is worth $100,000 because it's made of this type of material and it's in this neighborhood. You put that same house in the middle of Seattle or in La Jolla or somewhere in Lahaina in Maui, and that same exact house with the same materials, instead of worth $100,000, may be worth $1 million or $2 million. So it's subjective, you could say. But how do you value? My question is, what is of true value and worth to you? And if your Krishna consciousness isn't at the top of that, then you have to question your values. What are you valuing above your God consciousness? Now, there's so many things we have to place a value on, but if we forget to place a value on our Krishna consciousness and really protect, as Prabhupada says, that devotional creeper, and take care of it and value it. Yes, Prabhu.
I have a meeting.
You have a meeting.
That's the point. This man was ready to rush off when Prabhupada was giving him Krishna consciousness.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that story I told. Yeah. Yeah, he didn't realize. He didn't realize whose presence he was in. Any other comments, questions? Yes, Mother, how are you going?
You were talking about envy, and once I heard my Guru Maharaj Swami say that of the 6 bad qualities, lust, anger, envy, greed, delusion, sometimes they say madness and illusion. There's something else, like pride instead of madness. Of those 6 bad qualities, that actually every one of those but envy can be dovetailed in Krishna's service. Like, for example, Hanuman, he had to become angry to serve the Lord, to start Lanka on fire. So he was using that anger in the Lord's service. But envy is so, I don't know if insidious is the right word, but so despicable that, and like valueless for any positive goal, that it's the only one that can't be brought to.
Oh, thank you for sharing it. That's so important. Mother, Mama,
one time I was reading too, and I wish I had marked it, but I was reading because I was thinking, how do you be envious of Krishna? How do you, what's that? I don't think like I am envious of Krishna, And then I was reading where it was saying that even if you're envious of what somebody else has or somebody else's position, that's what Krishna had given them. That Krishna didn't give it to you. It's kind of an enviousness that you're having towards Krishna. You don't really realize that, but that's also envy of Krishna. And so whenever I find myself thinking this way or that way, there it is. That's how we can see that if we're actually envious of Krishna.
Yes, please.
I had a devotee.
Thank you.
Had a devotee tell me once, "I want what you have," and it shocked me. I thought, what? I said, Prabhu, and that's all I could say. Prabhu. But we all are envious of Krishna too. But thank you for sharing it, Martha.
Yogi Boo?
I remember reading this little tidbit, and the author said, she said, enviousness would be comical if it wasn't so painful. And here I am, I'm envying someone, but I have no idea of their suffering.
Thank you, Yogi.
I've heard it said that we envy Krishna because he's so attractive. We're attracted to him, but instead of serving him, we start thinking, wow, I'd like to be like that. And that's how I heard it starts.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, we're everyone. I'll bless you, the Prabhupada.